6858 today. Spectrum Business, made to work.
Got some soup for you.
You are loved. You are valued. You are resilient. You got this.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides at aarp.org/caregiving.
I'm Sharon Tazwell. Here's your Spectrum News in 90. Donald Trump held a joint rally with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in Arizona Friday. Kennedy announced he was suspending his presidential campaign and endorsing Donald Trump earlier in the day. He will remain on the ballot in most states, but says he doesn't want to help or harm the other candidates. The endorsement could potentially give Trump a boost from Kennedy's supporters.
But he is a phenomenal person, a phenomenal man who loves the people of this country as much as anybody can love the people of this country. So, Bobby, please say a few words. Thank you very much.
With the Democratic National Convention now over, Kamala Harris is shifting her focus to the upcoming presidential debate against Trump. The showdown is set for September 10th. Harris's schedule until then not fully known yet, but she's expected to visit more battleground states. And rate cut relief, economic news you've been waiting for as the head of the Federal Reserve signals America is winning the inflation battle. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell says interest rates could be cut in September to adjust.
Time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
Those are your headlines. Here's your weather on the ones.
Meteorologist Ian Cassette. We have multiple seasons found across the country this weekend, and it has a lot to do with the fact that we have an extreme weather pattern. For this weekend, 90s and hundreds build across the southern plains, while warming temperatures for the east that had been experiencing some fall-like weather. And then heading to the Pacific Northwest, 60s in Seattle, and this cool air is going to spread to the east. We'll have more about all this weather coming up on Weather on the Ones in the next 10 minutes.
Welcome to The Big Deal. I'm Errol Lewis, national political anchor at Spectrum News. Every week, we look at some of the biggest issues shaping our nation and the road to the White House. The Democratic National Convention wrapped up this week, with Kamala Harris taking the stage to formally accept the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. With both conventions now officially over, Republicans and Democrats are kicking into high gear. We're going to bring you full analysis of the race for president tonight and of the Democratic National Convention, this week's Big Deal.
The nation with this election has a precious, fleeting opportunity to move past the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of the past, a chance to chart a new way forward. Not as members of any one party or faction, but as Americans.
Joining me now to talk more about all of this are two of the top political analysts in America. They've both been covering the convention with me all week. Alex Cohen is a political anchor at Spectrum News 1 in Southern California. Curtis Jackson is a political anchor for Spectrum News 1 in Ohio. And Curtis, Democratic delegates approved a 92-page party platform this week. It was on the first night, as a matter of fact, and the document was more or less complete back when President Biden was in the race. We're still looking through that document for the details, but what can you tell us so far about Harris's Democratic Party and campaign will be different from what President Biden was planning?
It definitely goes further than what the Biden administration had put out in terms of what their policy priorities were going to be for 2024 and beyond. I think certainly when you start to look at issues like medical debt and having some sort of forgiveness for medical debt, that is definitely, I won't say a bridge too far for the Biden administration, but certainly further than what they were willing to go, although they have talked about it. And there's also the issues that are related to improving affordable housing and housing access. The $25,000 tax benefit for those who are buying homes for the first time. That is certainly a very significant step forward from where the Biden administration was during its first term. That all being said, there are a lot of things in the platform that are very familiar, whether you're talking about lowering the cost of prescription drugs, which of course both Harris and Biden got together just before the convention to tout, and then also continuing with middle-class tax cuts that are set to expire in 2025. They want to see those not only put back or restored, but also perhaps even advanced even further.
Okay, and now, Alex, let's listen to part of Harris's big speech where she talks about the dangers of a second Trump term.
Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails, and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States, not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself.
Now, that almost sounded like a trial lawyer making the case to a jury. And I remember hearing you observe that actually sort of speaks to the production values at the Democratic National Convention compared to their Republican counterparts at their convention. Both conventions were big spectacles, but there were some visual differences, and you say that that really ties into the substance of where Kamala Harris is coming from.
Absolutely, Errol. I mean, if you can cast your mind back to the Republican National Convention, when Donald Trump gave his big speech, he was in front of what looked like the White House. He looked incredibly presidential. It's why you hear people all the time in the media calling him President Trump, even though he's no longer the president, right? You get that image baked into your mind. And I remember seeing that thinking at the time, what are they going to do for President Biden if they already showed Trump in front of the White House? Now, of course, it was Kamala Harris. And I think it was a very smart move by the convention producers to all that wood paneling, seeing her there in front of the podium, and given her cadence and what we know she's done for so many years as a prosecutor, she came off incredibly lawyerly, which really put her in that position to make the case against her opponent.
Okay, so now, Curtis, let's talk about the running mate. On night 3, the vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz, had a chance to reintroduce himself to the party. Let's listen to that.
I had 24 kids in my high school class, and none of them went to Yale. But I'll tell you what, growing up in a small town like that, you learn how to take care of each other. That family down the road, they may not think like you do. They may not pray like you do. They may not love like you do, but they're your neighbors.
Okay, so Walz is from a small town. He beat up on Yale, the Ivy League school. Does that actually win over voters, do you think?
Didn't win over my wife so much. She's a Yale law grad. Anyway, she joked about that, by the way. I don't think it's going to hurt too much. I think it's just a little jab more advanced than it is the so-called coastal elites. But definitely, we're seeing from middle-class Joe in Joe Biden, now we're going to small-town Tim. I think that does resonate with a significant portion of the Democratic voters that have been lost to the Republican Party over the last several election cycles. And there's always been that push, question, how are we going to get those voters back? the Democratic Party has been asking this for a very, very long time. They certainly have tried it under the Biden administration with policy. When you look at where all of the money is going, for example, when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act or the CHIPS and Science Act, for that matter, here in Ohio, that money is funding the huge Intel plant that is now being built in Licking County. That's a rural area. So they have tried their best to target resources towards rural America in hopes of luring some of those voters back. I think what they have missed and what they now have is somebody who speaks their language and somebody that they can identify with.
Okay, and now, Alex, on the first night, President Biden was there, and he formally passed the torch to Harris, insisting that his speech was not a goodbye.
Kamala and Tim understand that this nation must continue to be a place of possibilities, not just for the few of us, but for all of us. But join me in promising your whole heart to this effort, and where my heart will be. I promise I'll be the best volunteer Harris and Waltz has ever seen.
Okay, it's nice to say, of course, Alex, but what will Biden's role really be? Is he really going to hit the campaign trail, do you think?
I don't know if he'll necessarily hit the campaign trail. I think we can expect, because look, we live in a world of clips, right? There's a lot that he could do, even chilling at the Santa Barbara Vineyard that he's been at this week following his appearance in Chicago. But look, Biden can pretty much do anything right now. He's got tremendous political capital given the very difficult decision he made. He still has several months left in his presidency, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what key choices might he make in those months, knowing it caps off a tremendously lengthy career and one that right now is on a high note for making that difficult, but many saw it as necessary decision.
Okay, let's pause right there. We're going to talk more about how the Democratic National Convention changes the race for president and for other races. I'll be joined by our panel of Spectrum News political experts after this short break. Stay with us.
Spectrum News Plus, news from a new perspective, dedicated to refreshing storytelling and empowering communities across the nation. With balanced reporting, providing real context and in-depth coverage 24 hours a day.
Here's a look at your forecast across the country.
Local stories, connecting communities. We are Spectrum News Plus. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
At Spectrum, we know that internet is a vital tool to help you fulfill your dreams.
My dream is to become a video game developer.
My dream is to get my online college degree. That's why Spectrum has affordable solutions to keep you connected. At Spectrum, we are committed to delivering reliable, affordable internet and unlimited mobile to keep you connected to what matters most to you.
When I never graduated from high school, I realized I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work these back-breaking jobs the rest of my life. With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed to come back to school. I felt accomplished, made me feel that I could take on whatever challenges life throws at you.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
We're back with The Big Deal with more analysis of the Democratic National Convention. Here's where the race for president stands right now. Kamala Harris is currently leading in the national polls, up by a few percentage points over Donald Trump. And if you look at the 7 key battleground states, Harris is leading in 6 out of 7, all but Georgia. We also know that Harris currently holds a cash advantage after outraising Donald Trump last month. So will this pivotal week help boost the Harris campaign, or will the race tighten up again? Spectrum News political anchors Alex Cohen and Curtis Jackson are still with me, and joining us is political anchor Susan Arbetter, joining us from Albany, New York. And Susan, normally party leaders lay low while their adversaries are holding their convention, but Donald Trump and J.D. Vance tried a different approach by so-called counter-programming. Here's what Trump said about the convention this week.
You know, they always say, sure, please stick to policy, don't get personal. And yet they're getting personal all night long, these people. Do I still have to stick to policy?
So that's a little bit of what it sounded like, Susan. What did Trump and Vance end up doing, and how well did it work?
So, as you suggested, Errol, there was no lying low. Just start with last night during Kamala Harris's acceptance speech. Trump was on Truth Social taking shots at her as well as the president. At one point, he tweeted, "Where's Hunter?" in reference to Joe Biden's son. He also called Harris a radical Marxist and comrade Kamala, and falsely stated that Democrats wanted Roe to end and be sent back to the states. But throughout the week, both Trump and Vance stumped in swing states, including Michigan, North Carolina, and Arizona, on issues that many voters perceive to be weak spots for Democrats. For example, on Tuesday in Michigan, Trump attacked Harris's record on crime and safety, and on. And today he was at the border in Arizona.
Okay, so now, Curtis, 2 of the speeches that really got a lot of attention during this convention were when the Obamas spoke on Tuesday.
I don't care how you identify politically, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, or none of the above. This is our time to stand up for what we know in our hearts is right.
We do not need 4 more years of bluster and bumbling and chaos. We have seen that movie before, and we all know that the sequel is usually worse.
Now, how much of that was personal, Curtis? It almost seemed like they had a score to settle with Donald Trump.
You know, it was shades of that Washington Correspondents' Dinner where Obama mocked Trump, and then that was supposedly one of the reasons that Trump decided to run. And then it was just plain old shade. I think they were throwing a little bit, but I think it had a purpose to it, and that is to remind people that while history does not repeat itself, it does often rhyme. And the same attacks that were deployed by former President Donald Trump before he was in public office against then President Obama had to deal a lot with the birtherism issue and questionings of racial identity and belongingness to America. So I think that, yes, there was an answer to this that was for them personal, but it had a political message, which was, we've seen this before. We need to do something to make sure it doesn't continue.
Okay. Now, Alex, we had some breaking news today. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has suspended his campaign and endorsed Donald Trump. Kennedy was not polling well, but the Democrats did put out a message inviting his supporters to come on board. What's the latest? What's going on there?
Oh, there's a whole lot here, Errol. He is suspending his campaign, not ending it. And he actually invited voters who are not in swing states, like here in California, saying, still vote for me. Let's make a point here. Interesting to note, although Kamala Harris's campaign has invited his supporters to come vote for her, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said today that he tried to reach out to Kamala Harris's team to see if there might be some role for him, and they refused to accept the meeting. That has created a certain bit of buzz on social media. Also very interesting to note that shortly after RFK Jr. held this conference, relatives of the candidate, 5 of his siblings, came out with a statement doubling down on they didn't support him, they never supported him, that they choose joy and hope, and they are aligning with Kamala Harris. So in the end, it's going to be really interesting to see see where those RFK supporters wind up. Tough to tell.
Okay. And then, Susan, the convention included a number of Republican officials, including former members of Congress, a former lieutenant governor, and many others. What's the thinking there? What's the idea behind that strategy?
I think that by treating MAGA as a kind of cult or perhaps even an addiction, the Democrats have been able to claim the allegiance of people who have escaped the cult or who have kicked the addiction, and also treat them as a sort of occupying a moral high ground. They did that with Adam Kinzinger. They did that with Stephanie Grisham and with several former MAGA voters.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Susan. Thanks to all of you. We're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we'll take a look at some key dates for the campaigns as Election Day approaches. Stay with us.
Here's the deal. In this election year, people need a place to explore national issues that have an impact on their community. To understand those issues better, we're bringing together our team of local political journalists from across the country to break down what's happening. So join us every week to catch up on the key stories making a big difference across the nation and in your local community.
Watch The Big Deal with Errol Lewis Friday nights at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on Spectrum News Plus. Available on all of your favorite devices exclusively on Spectrum.
Give me one good reason why I shouldn't switch to Spectrum Enterprise.
Well, you said our services meet some of your technology needs.
But not all.
Well, maybe you have too many.
Demand better. And when they call you unreasonable, call us.
Look, I'm switching to Spectrum Enterprise because they'll be a true partner, and I can't run this network without one.
I think you can.
Our clients do it all the time.
Demand better. And when they call you unreasonable, call us.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
We are back with The Big Deal. I'm Errol Lewis. As we count down the final weeks until Election Day, there are a lot of important dates we are tracking. The first presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is scheduled for September 10th. That's happening in Philadelphia. And there's a vice presidential debate scheduled between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance in New York City. That's going to happen on October 1st. Spectrum News national political reporter Taylor Popolars has been covering the convention all week. He joins us now from Chicago with a preview of what comes next for the campaigns. And Taylor, that June debate between Trump and President Biden really underscored how big of an effect debates can have. It basically led to the end of the Biden campaign. How is Harris preparing for her big date coming up in September?
Well, Errol, we know that the vice president has already been engaging in debate prep, even though she had this big convention to prepare for, arguably the biggest speech of her political career. She's actually met with her team a few times behind closed doors and has been preparing, engaging in kind of more traditional debate prep, something we know that on the other side, former President Donald Trump tries to avoid because he wants to appear more organic at debates. So the Harris team is taking this seriously. We've spoken with some of her top aides who say they view that debate as really a big moment. It will actually be the first time that Harris meets Donald Trump in person. She's never really interacted with him before, which is just such a stark contrast from the relationship that Trump and President Joe Biden had. So I think the debate will be a really big moment. We haven't heard much from Harris outside of these big arena and rally settings, so it'll be interesting to hear her talk about policy, talk about, her ideals, while also going directly after Trump to his face. We heard in her convention speech very specific attacks against him. It'll be much different when they're face-to-face in person.
Okay, now the traditional role of the vice presidential nominees has been to act as attack dogs. And indeed, they've been taking aim at each other. They seem eager to face off on October 1st. What can we expect in that case?
I think that debate is really going to be fascinating because Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz share some things in common. Both are veterans, both are Midwesterners, but the difference is that it kind of stops there. The differences are pretty stark. Both have been going after each other, as you alluded to, and they don't really seem to have much affection for one another, and they both are really the chief attack dogs, I should say, for their presidential counterparts. So I think it'll be interesting to see them face one another, specifically to talk about their military service. Vance has been accusing Walz of stolen valor, which is obviously no small thing. Walz spent 24 years in the Army National Guard. Vance spent several years as a Marine. Both of them served overseas at various points, but neither of them saw combat. So I think it'll be really fascinating to see how they talk about that. We've also heard from Walz this week at the convention going after Vance's pedigree and the fact that he went to Ivy League schools. Many members of the Democratic Party have also gone to Ivy League schools. Even former President Donald Trump prioritizes them and idolizes them. So I think it could get personal, but I think it'll also be very representative of kind of the more personal side of this campaign, because Harris and Trump, of course, want to focus on the bigger ideals. I think Vance and Walz will be able to go after each other kind of on the more culture war sides of this.
Okay, and then finally, Taylor, we're only 2 weeks away from the first state, which is North Carolina, starting their mail-in voting. Early voting is really right around the corner. It starts in North Carolina on September 6th, which is a full 2 months before Election Day. September, though, of course, also has a lot of unknown questions about where Trump will be legally. There's some important dates there on the legal calendar, right?
There are. The biggest question in the month of September is, will former President Trump get his sentence for the New York hush money case where he was found guilty of 34 felonies? It's currently set to happen on September 18th, but he is trying to get that delayed until after the election in the hopes that he wins the election and then it can be entirely put off. So we'll have to see. His other criminal cases have essentially been stalled out and likely won't be taking place before the election. There could be changes every single day. There are new legal filings, but that sentencing, of course, will be a big deal if it happens. It could come right around the time that he and Harris are facing off in this first debate, and it could change the trajectory of the remainder of the campaign if he does indeed get sentenced. But the judge in that case is looking over things, especially after the Supreme Court ruled about presidential immunity. All of Trump's legal jeopardies are now put into question. But to your point, people will be casting ballots early, and so it could have an impact on what's on the top of people's minds if they decide to vote early.
Okay, great work at the convention. We'll see you out on the campaign trail. Thank you, Taylor. And we thank you all for joining us on The Big Deal. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned to your local station.
At Spectrum News, we're committed to strengthening the fabric of local communities through our reporting, with stories that inspire and news that matters. Streaming live on your smart TV and connected devices, plus on-demand weather forecasts. It's all there as you step outside with the Spectrum News mobile app, keeping you informed and in the know throughout your day. Spectrum News Plus, local stories connecting communities. Exclusively for Spectrum customers. Now available on your favorite devices.
At Spectrum, our workforce of over 100,000 employees are all located right here in the U.S. You can find them in our stores, in the field, and in our call centers with 100% U.S.-based customer service. Our team works hard to provide the towns, cities, and neighborhoods they live in with the reliable services that everyone counts on, making us one of America's most trusted companies. We're Spectrum, creating jobs and opportunities across the country, and proud to be 100% U.S.-based.
Today, I'm going to talk to you about physics. Come on in, girls. Let's go. This is the first rocket to get humans to Mars.
Really tall.
I'm a rocket structural engineer, designing and building parts of the rocket. You are the generation that will be stepping foot on Mars. Do I have a group of astronauts on my hands?
Yes.
You can become a rocket scientist or whatever else you want to be.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Never gonna let you go.